Welcome back. This is K24 This Morning. It's the second part of our newspaper review. The tweets coming in at K24 TV. Michael Brown, K24 This Morning, watching live from County 001. Let's discuss issues of the day. Let's go. Okay, got you right there, loud and clear. First of his name also coming in right there as far as Twitter is concerned at K24 TV, saying a very good morning, even as they watch the show. And even as we just come down to the funeral service tomorrow, and of course his interment on Wednesday. Let's talk about the country as a whole and 24 years of rule under President Moi. Something Rima has spoken about before we went into the break, just looking at the economy then vis-a-vis now and how we're doing worse off than it was at that particular point in time. Where was the ball dropped? Because probably it's human nature that once Dennis has left, we shall praise him and how we should have had him instead of who we have now in terms of Griffins. But looking at the data, looking at where we stand as a country, where did we go wrong? Because it almost seems like even after Moi left, Kibaki did come in. He left his blueprint, but it almost feels like there's somewhere where that follow-through, that disconnect seems to happen. What usually goes wrong, Dennis?
I think we have to be very careful to assert that the economy was doing well during Moi times, because I was there. And the truth is that the economy was stagnant. It's absolutely a lie to say that the economy thrived then. And I think we may be caught up, comparing mangoes and oranges, because the economic dimensions now are completely different to Moi days. You know, the population has grown. Our needs as a nation are different. We're under new economic and political and constitutional dispensation. Our needs are not the same needs that they were many, many years back. You know, we have a dream as a nation. We didn't have a dream then. And then if you look at it, there was a collapse of a lot of, farming institutions. KCC, KFA, KPCU, many of them collapsed at that particular time. And I think if we really look at the economy those days of Moi, the economy survived merely by divine interventions by God. And that was the true nature.
So you feel there's been an improvement
from then? So there hasn't been an improvement at all. But it would be impossible to compare the economy in Moi days and to compare the economy now. Because it's completely mangoes and oranges. But if anybody lived within those times, perhaps life wasn't as demanding as possible, because my father raised us as a teacher. And we were 4 of us. I mean, it wasn't a small home. He raised his brothers and his sisters. The cost of living was not as dynamic as now. But then, that really was an autocratic nation. We were under dictatorial dispensation. There are very few, there are very few things that you could do really with your money. But truly, then, is that the cost of living was not as it is now. Because now if you look at it, if you're a teacher and you have 4 children, at the end of the day, and you want to educate them to university level and whatever it is, it's almost absolutely impossible. Buying milk in itself is absolutely hard. So I think what it is that there is that Kenyans are still where they were, technically, if you want to put us on the same plate. Because we are still struggling. We were not thriving then. I mean, because who would dare say that they were thriving? You know, the billionaires were people who perhaps worked in government and whatever it is. The farmers lived within a lot of problems. You look at the coffee sector, the tea sector, because I come from that place where we farm coffee and tea. The truth of the fact is that there wasn't any independent. The cartels were there, even there. So if we look at it and we ask ourselves, and the thing that we need to ask is, have our markets grown? Has democracy declined, or is democracy a facade? Because there is no democracy without economic freedom at the end of the day. So have we grown economically as a nation? Are we able to make, as individuals, personal decisions with our money? Do we have access to credit? You know, at the end of the day, what has been made better, within this dispensation as it was now? But it is the same players making the same economic decisions for us politically. How then can it change? But if you look at then, perhaps we used to operate with a budget of perhaps less than a few billions. Today we are ranking in trillions, and there is nothing that we have done. The country is still largely operating on the same template of schools. Perhaps a few roads have increased or thereabout. Hospitals haven't increased much. If you look at the increase many years back, over 20 years back of Moi's rule, how many hospitals, have we put in place or have we upgraded? How many roads, perhaps, and we say Kibaki has done roads, but how many roads are those? So the truth of the matter is that if we do a resource and an infrastructure audit, actually, an infrastructure audit of Moi days and an infrastructure audit of today, then we will see that perhaps the growth has been a mere 5%. Because the truth of the matter is that the most outstanding building today is KICC that was built by Jomo Kenyatta. There hasn't been anything incredible. The largest hospital that we have, perhaps referral hospital, is still Kenyatta Hospital, that was built those days, not even in the Moi days. So what has improved? Perhaps nothing. Is this country improving or declining? The truth of the fact is that democracy is declining, and it's a facade in this country. The economy is in tatters. In fact, perhaps it doesn't even exist. This is a time that we must carefully reflect on whether we have made gains as a country or this country is retrogressing. And the people to squarely sometimes blame. Because sometimes us, because the truth of the fact is that I always say, you can't stop bad history from happening. The truth of the fact is that in the Moi days, God raised fathers from churches that put Moi in check. If you remember Bishop Muge, if you remember Archbishop Gitare, if you remember Bishop Okulu, those are men and women in the faith sector that never slept, traveled in the boots of the car, that had to put Moi in check. The question is, where are those fathers today that are putting this regime into check? And if we don't have such men today, then there'll be a problem.
Nerima, even as, before I get to Griffin, I want to come to you because do you have a rejoinder on that in the sense that even as we talk about Moi's administration and the economy, if we compare, it really wasn't doing as good as some people might say it was back in the day?
I was speaking from fact. And factually, statistics do show that it was doing better. I was not speaking on feelings. I do agree that the population has increased, the demands are more, but on fact, at that time, the population, if measured according to ratio, it was doing better. But I think the only thing that I can add on that is not to say that Moi was a perfect president, that he was great. And frankly, a lot of the media has been sanitizing his history. It's to say that there are some aspects of him that he did well, including the Kenya Unite Front, where he was calling it the face of Kenya, which was also one of his programs that he pushed for. But there are also things that he did terribly wrong. Right. I think what we need to be honest about are the different facets that he had as a leader, because there's no individual that we can say is as perfect and as clean and is an angel. We all have the different sides to them.
Griffin, I'll come to you because there's the economy that we are talking about. There's matters of education as well, but also one thing that he was really passionate about was the environment. If there's one thing that people remember him is building gabions, talking about planting of trees. Yet we come to today and look at what's happening at the Mau. We look at what's been happening across not only the country but the region internationally as well. Why did we drop that ball and now we are back there saying we want more forest cover, but to get that we have to go back to if you're planting one, you still have to plant the 2 trees.
I think in terms of Moi being somebody who liked the environment and looking into the future, that his scores are fast because he was even recognized. Is it in 1981 that he was one of the few presidents in Africa that actually took care of the environment? But going back to the economy, I think I'd like to echo what Nerima said, because if you look at the economy right now, I think let's look at the per capita income. What can 1,000 shillings do for an ordinary Kenyan right now? And what could 1,000 shillings do back 20 years ago? I remember my school fees when I was going to Maseno School was around, the entire year, it was around 49,000. And that time we used to do chicken. But nowadays, I don't know how much people pay in Maseno School right now, for instance. My father tells me that 50 shillings was a lot of money to have. If somebody gave you 500 bob, it was a lot of money to have. But today, let me tell you, if you go back to the villages, some people might think that the economy is doing better, but I think it's a case of robbing Peter to pay Paul. Yes, we are seeing roads. Yes, there's a lot of infrastructure. But how is that ordinary Mama Mboga, the Wanjiku down there, feeling? Somebody cracked a joke that I cannot be driving on a tarmac road on an empty stomach. It doesn't make sense. So you have to take care of the fundamentals: food, shelter, clothing. How many people can access food in this country today? How many people, I mean, look at it, there's been this irony that you're going to take electricity to a grass-thatched house. So it's typically a case of inverted priorities. And some other people have said these are avenues to siphon public funds. We have the SGR, for instance. Look at some of the measures that the government is doing. There was a law recently that all goods that are coming from Mombasa must be brought to Nairobi using the SGR. That's just a strategy to try to keep the project afloat. But ideally, it does not support the ordinary mama mboga. And for me, the growth of a country, or how we measure the growth of a country, is how my grandmother down in South Nyanza can comfortably live every day without having to struggle. So basically what has happened is, yes, we can feel the economy is opening. You know, money has been opened and there are opportunities for growth. But how many people can access those opportunities? It's just very few. Remember, in times of Moi, let me tell you, I don't know whether today we can stand up to China and tell them, we don't want your support. Because Moi, I think from 1987, faced the Bretton Woods institutions, the IMF and the World Bank, and told them, we don't need your support. Until around the year 1999, when they formed the Dream Team to try and restore the relations. But for those 10 or 15 years, we lived without the support of the donor funds. Can we do that today? Can we tell China, look at what happened yesterday, for instance, when that Chinese guy was beating a Kenyan. Right. Such a thing wouldn't happen during Moi's time. But today, because we depend on them, we cannot tell them the truth. Because we're basically having our begging bowls to them. We have to beg them to survive.
Right.
So I think in terms of how the economy is doing, I want to look at it at how can an ordinary... Right now, people wake up at 4 a.m. to come to work. 4 a.m. Even kids are going to school at 4 a.m. I used to wake up at 7:30 a.m. and walk to school by 8. Then when I get to school, we play for 1 hour. Class used to begin at 8:45. What time do kids go to school right now? It shows you how the economy is doing. So I think if you ask me, the days of Moi, that's why he was called number one, man of intelligence. And for me, I think, yes, he had his bad side. There was no democracy. But let me ask you today, is there democracy? We have democracy. Do we have democracy?
That's a question.
We don't have democracy. We don't have democracy. That is the truth. Like right now, there's a joke that has been going on. If you've been caught in corruption and the DCA is on your case, you only need to move from Tangatanga and join Kieleweke. So that tells you there's no democracy.
We'll be talking about the democracy and the state of it as far as it's concerned right here. Fred, I'll ask you the same question because it seems like there are probably differing views on this table as far as how the economy was then as opposed to now. Of course, population has increased, but it seems like the cost of living also sharply going up. And you look at any other parameter to gauge by, and it seems like by and large, we're still generally around the same spot, still struggling with the same issues. Yes, we have a bigger democratic space to shout from, but the needs that should have been met, still the same.
Well, there's so many ways of looking at it. During those times, the measures of economic growth were probably not exact as what they are today. And if we were to draw those graphs and compare them in terms of analysis, they would basically show the same thing, but in different eras. So for me, I would look at it today, the needs of Kenyans have basically remained more or less the same. But during those days, their needs were food. People needed water. People needed to go to school, which is still the same. But if you look at how President Moi's government tackled those issues, because that is why every single time you could be seen visiting regions and saying harambe harambe tujenge pamoja, the rallying call that brings people together, the nyayo nyayo fuata nyayo, follow the footsteps. Today, the biggest problem that we have in this country is leadership. And leadership not from the government alone, but leadership even from political leaders who are elected, where corruption has taken over. And that's why we are not able to meet some of the services, as a matter of fact, that we need to meet. In Moi's era, there was corruption. But there was also circulation of money. You know, when money circulates in a region, then the economy of that region goes up. Even if it is for a few months, it goes up. Today, if somebody came and gave 1 million shillings in a tiny village, I can assure you that money will find its way into different pockets, and people will eat, people will go to school for some time. So imagine if that money was to come every single month. It means that economy will grow. Today we don't have that, because a lot of money that comes in goes into private pockets. And that's why we can confidently say that our economy today probably is doing worse than when it was, than during President Moi's time. Because Moi had this idea of when he visits a region, he must leave something. Because he recognized that this is the only way I can also reward the people I lead. Whether it was a form of arambe, whether it was in the form of just giving a token, it worked. Okay. The other thing that I've also noticed is, you see today, all politicians will come with the same narrative. In fact, during elections, if you look at the manifestos, most of them, I think, are a copy-paste of the other. We're looking at the same issues. The problem is, how do we tackle them in terms of delivery? Do you believe when they came to government, they promised certain things? The opposition then also promised certain things. And if you look at them, they're more or less the same. But during Moi's time, you know, Moi never had actually competitors in politics. So the way he used to do his things is he proceeds from where he left the last election and continues. So that was a legacy that people would say, at least he's building a legacy. But today, you can actually pinpoint and say, the last regime promised 1, 2, 3, they did only 1. This regime promised 1, 2, 3, they have not done any, or they have done something. So right. It is easier today to pinpoint and say, this government is not working, while it was not easy those days to say, this government is not working. Because Moi was in power for 24 years, and if you look at the circulation of money those times, it was constantly there because he was doing his thing as he was doing it. Today, because of change of guard and so on and so forth, you can actually try to compare. You want to compare President Kibaki with President Uhuru. You want to compare President Kibaki with President Moi. So it becomes very difficult, and then that gap is very visible. I'm not saying a ruler should do that for long, but I'm saying those days, it was actually, the economic indicators were not as visible as they are today, because things have changed. You say 49,000 then was a lot of money. Today, it is nothing. 1,000 bob those days was a lot. Today, actually, you walk out there and you remain 50 bob. So you can actually not compare one for one, but you can compare the standards of life. Because if I give you 1 million shillings today, Jeff, it is true, 1 million shillings will not be like what if I would have given you those days. It is true, yes.
But I think I wouldn't agree with Okango, because in terms of Moi going and dishing out freebies, Dennis was saying that it was money that had been looted in one way or the other. I think the purpose of the government, or the purpose of any political dispensation, is to actually try and ensure that we create enablers to grow the economy. The government right now says that we're creating enablers with Duma centers and so on and so forth. But I think we are creating enablers when we're not taking care of the fundamentals. So I think in terms of trying to say that money circulates, I don't think dishing out money is the best way to circulate money. I think, like right now, the president has been trying to make county governments and the national government pay, for instance, the SMEs. Right. And the reason why we are not having money in circulation right now is because people are not being paid, for instance. And when you hold people's money for so long, it basically means money is not, circulating. Right. So I think, unlike in the past, I don't know, is it because of now there's easy information flow and we can get, I cannot really say whether in the past money also used to be kept like that. But I think there's a joke that goes around. When was the last time you picked a 5 boy on the road? So money was even circulating on the road. You could pick 5 or 10 bob. But right now it's not easy to pick 5 or 10 bob. Only that if you pick the money in my village, you'd be...
Jeff, let me tell you something. The reason why these gents here are saying that the economy is pinching now and not then is because now they're the working class. Then they were kiddies. They have no idea what our parents went through. My father had 1 pair of shoe and 1 suit for a long time. And he wasn't the lowest grade of a teacher. He was a principal who was of value. We didn't live any comfortable life at the end of the day. My mother, by the way, was a banker. And I was born in a mud hut. Roads were dilapidated. That's the reason why when Kibaki took power, the first thing that we loved Kibaki for was the fact that he was an economist. The economy changed. How can an economy change from a good economy? Kenyans forget so easily. I don't want you to dish me money that you have robbed from me. Let us speak the truth. It is true that we respect Moi as a father of this nation, but let us be alive to what went wrong, because that is the critical lesson that we must borrow. The truth of the fact is that as Kenyans, we must forgive him for what he did. And I'm sure for the 18 years that God has given him life, he took his time to repent. But have we repented for the role that we played, you know, as members of the nation? But these guys are working now. They know the cost of 1,000 shillings. You know, I will not go and narrate to my children how difficult it is to take 4 kids to school because I have 4 children. I'm not going to tell them, we are dying in this house. No, I will give them hope. Every morning they have to be dropped to school. Sometimes in the night when you don't have transport, you're not going to tell children, listen, tomorrow you guys are not going to school. No. I will struggle the entire night to make sure that I fuel, where even fuel nowadays, 1,000 bob is nothing. But the truth of the fact is that the economy was in tatters then because it was an autocratic, dictatorial nation. We brought in Katiba 2010 to change those dynamics, to devolve finances, to devolve the economy, to devolve everything of the sort. So the truth is, we must never delete history, because that history will give us critical lessons for us to know how then do we advance democracy. And somebody said democracy is a scumbag. It's for the rich at the end of the day. Because democracy today doesn't make sense to my grandmother, who is a coffee and a tea farmer, and every day she doesn't see it. She's saying, can I remove all these 10 acres of coffee and tea so that I can plant avocados? But even the avocado itself, they went to parliament and legislated that it's a control of the field. We must never, at the end of the day, delete history, but we must forgive the ills that we have done through. Because we can't carry the sins of Moi for 18 years.
Before we look at traffic as well, is that what's going on right now from your account? Are we deleting and revising history with what we're seeing?
We are improving it and painting it and putting lips
It's very
on
important in human beings' life. In fact, it is history that makes life interesting.
Yeah.
That is why today we love Moi and hate him in equal measure because of what he did and because of what he did not do. And remember those days, we never had devolution. Today, you can actually pinpoint the failure of 2 levels of government, national and the county, because of devolution. Because of the 4th schedule where the powers...
Which BBI is killing, by the way.
During those days, it was not easy because government was one. Moi had got the provincial administration, the PCs were powerful, the PSs were powerful, and then the Kano district officers were very powerful. So,
and the youth wingers.
And the youth wingers. Those were the days when, what he said that you could not speak bad against the government. Today, we have got the democracy, and we have also abused that democracy in a way. Yeah. But I can dare say that we can never compare the economy during President Moi's time and today. Not that Moi was better, but life during those times was better.
Because you're a child.
No. Just let me say
you are a child.
Let me say this. I think let's look at the truth.
You are a child.
In Moi's time, I think life is best told through stories. I like to say life through stories. When I was a young man growing up, my grandmother would pick me from our village. We go to Tinga market. We sell pineapples. And let me tell you, that money was enough to, you know, pineapples. We would go, T-bonuses was something that was T-bonuses were friendly. I mean, everybody was waiting for that opportunity. I remember from the year 2017, have our farmers been receiving T-bonuses? There's nothing.
Right.
Pineapples, right now, pineapples, in fact, if I go back to my village, there are no pineapples there anymore. I don't have the site to go back to the village. Now, what has happened is right now, the rich are even getting richer because of corruption. Let me tell you, nowadays, to wake up in the morning and see somebody has stolen 100 million is not news. Because, I mean, 100 million...
Even then it was being stolen.
If you stole 100 million, if you stole 100 million those days, let me tell you, one thing I like about Moi, yes, there was stealing, there was what. That Moi, when Moi shook your hands, there was something.
I mean, and
But
people are
also,
saying that.
even-
But right now,
Griffin,
you see,
Griffin's not
what do you
saying is,
mean?
even as we talk about corruption now,
Yeah.
when you look back at his administration,
Yeah.
some of the biggest scandals did
Yeah.
happen during his time.
but then my father and mother were teachers, primary school, they are still primary school teachers. But I'll tell you, we used to pay rent in a good place.
How much was it?
2,500.
I mean, you're in the village, but
Not
then-
in the village. Kiss is
No,
not a village.
I mean, Kiss is
No,
the
but
village.
Kiss is not a village.
I mean, how much?
I don't know if you grew up in.
Dennis,
How much has it been?
your point.
See, but the point is,
anyway.
the point is, I don't know. The point is, let me give a classical example. When I came to this, I think when you compare those regimes and this regime, there's one regime that I can actually give accolades to, the Kibaki regime. I think
the economy.
he did very well.
So how can
Yes,
you
people
turn an
could-
economy around from another good economy?
We are not saying
That's a
we're looking at the better one.
What is that?
Is
There's
that
nothing like a better one. No.
But there are certain facts that we cannot change. And history teaches us that.
Exactly.
When President Moi was in power from those times, and a lot of them, I'm happy they're giving examples of teachers. Teachers were the best paid then.
Amen.
Exactly.
Teachers managed to take their kids to better school.
Yeah.
Teachers managed to take circle loans and did their projects those days. How do we now say that the economy those days was equally bad? We cannot say that.
No, we can't.
And what I'm saying is, during that time, the measures or the indicators of growth were that.
Were clear.
Were that. Today we cannot say that because things have changed. People have, the population has increased. We have a lot of debt because we are trying to catch up with the world so that we develop and we have to borrow. That is what it is. We cannot compare. But what remains is there are certain things that the leadership that time did not do well. We must correct it. We cannot lie about it. Then there are certain things that happened better at that time. We also must appreciate that that happened. And that's why those who love Moi today can say Moi was good. And those who hate him can also say Moi didn't do better, Kibaki did better.
Okay,
that is the comparison.
Just a brief bit. No, we'll have to take a pause right there because we also have to look at the roads that you're talking about. Some that were constructed during Moi's time and some others later. Dennis, we have to look at that right now. We're going to look at your traffic in just a bit to know how that's looking. But we also want your views as well. As you can see, things are heating up very quickly right here. We want your say as well at K24 TV. You can also SMS us on 21222. But it's a Monday. We want to make sure that you go to wherever you're going. Minus the traffic. We have Chico on the side. Where do we start?
Wow, what a panel you have this morning, Jeff, indeed. And the debate continues. Even as you can give us your views on, of course, the news, let's take a look at your roads. And this morning, I'd like us to actually focus on the possible roads that will be closed as the